Motivation is one of the most searched words on the internet. Every day millions of people type some version of the same request into a search bar. How to get motivated. How to stay motivated. How to find motivation when you have none. How to get it back when it disappears. They watch videos about it, read articles about it, follow accounts dedicated entirely to delivering it in concentrated doses through quotes and music, and carefully edited footage of people achieving things in slow motion. And then they close the tab, and nothing changes. Not because the content was bad or the intention was wrong or the person consuming it did not genuinely want to change, but because motivation is not what they needed. It is what felt like what they needed, which is a different thing entirely. And the difference between those two things is the reason that a person can spend years feeling genuinely motivated in the moments of consuming inspiration and genuinely stuck in all the moments that follow. Motivation is the feeling of wanting to act. It is not the act itself. It is not the system that produces the act consistently. It is not the identity that makes the act inevitable regardless of feeling. It is a feeling, valuable, real, worth having, that is also temporary, unreliable, and structurally incapable of doing the job most people are asking it to do. Jamie had been asking it to do that job for 4 years. Stay with us, because today we are telling the story of a man who spent 4 years chasing the feeling instead of building the foundation, and the unexpected conversation that finally showed him what had been missing the entire time. And if stories like this one matter to you, subscribe, because somebody out there needs to hear exactly this today. Jamie was 29 years old and had an impressive relationship with motivation. He experienced it frequently and intensely. The surge of it that arrived after a powerful video was as real and as energizing as anything he felt. A genuine, full-body conviction that things were going to be different, that the version of himself he had been working toward was closer than it had seemed an hour ago, that the only thing standing between where he was and where he wanted to be was the decision to begin. He would begin, with real energy and real intention and the particular brightness that the beginning of things reliably produced in him. The beginning always felt like the answer. The problem was what happened after the beginning. Jamie had a pattern that he recognized but had never been able to break. The inspiration would arrive through a video, a book, a conversation, a moment of honest self-reflection that produced a clear vision of what he wanted and a burning desire to pursue it. He would start. He would work with focus and energy for a period that varied in length but averaged somewhere between 4 days and 2 weeks. Then the feeling would soften. The urgency would lose its edges. The task that had seemed electric in the first days of the cycle would begin to feel like exactly what it was: work, with all the friction and resistance that work involves when the novelty has worn off. And Jamie, without fully deciding to, would begin the process of refueling. Not resting, refueling. Returning to the sources that had produced the original surge, looking for enough of the feeling to sustain the momentum that the feeling alone had never been able to sustain. Another video, another book, another morning of consuming content about the thing rather than doing the thing. Each session producing a smaller return than the one before, the way a stimulus always produces diminishing returns when repeated too frequently without the underlying condition changing. He had been in this loop for 4 years. The loop had a rhythm he knew intimately. Inspiration, start, soften, refuel, repeat. It was not a cycle that produced nothing. He had begun many things inside it, had moments of genuine progress scattered across its repetitions, had accumulated fragments of skills and projects and half-built things that represented real effort honestly applied. But it was a cycle that had never taken him anywhere significantly different from where he had started. The wheel turned. The ground beneath it did not change. He was not unmotivated. He was addicted to motivation. And the addiction, like most addictions, was preventing him from building the thing it was supposed to be fueling. The shift arrived through a conversation Jamie had not been looking for. He was at a weekend workshop, a personal development event he had attended with the hope that sufficient in-person inspiration would produce a different result than the digital version had been producing. The content was good. The energy in the room was real, but it was not the workshop itself that changed anything. It was the person sitting next to him at lunch. Her name was Constance. She was in her mid-40s, quietly confident in the way of someone who has built something over a long period and no longer needs external validation to know it is real. They had gotten talking in the natural way of two strangers placed adjacent to each other for an hour, and somewhere in the conversation Jamie had described his pattern, the cycle, the starts, the refueling, the frustrating absence of sustained progress despite consistent effort. Constance had listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked him one question. "What do you do on the days when you feel nothing?" Jamie paused. He said he usually spent those days looking for the feeling, consuming content, trying to reconnect with the original inspiration, waiting until the motivation returned before resuming the work. Constance nodded slowly. She said, "That is the whole problem. You have built your system around the feeling arriving. You need to build a system that runs whether the feeling arrives or not." She explained it simply. Motivation was a visitor, a welcome one, genuinely useful when it showed up, worth appreciating in the moments it was present. But it was a visitor. It came and went on its own schedule, independent of need or intention, reliably absent on the days when it was most required. A system built around a visitor's presence was a system that stopped working every time the visitor did not show up. What she had learned, she said, and what had taken her longer than she wished to learn, was that the work needed to happen on a different basis entirely. Not on the basis of feeling, on the basis of identity. On the decision made once, held firmly, expressed through consistent behavior, that she was the kind of person who did the work regardless of how she felt about it on any given day. Not discipline applied against resistance. Identity expressed through action. When you believe you are someone who writes every morning, you write every morning, not because you are motivated every morning, but because that is what people like you do. The motivation, when it arrives, is a bonus. When it does not, the work continues anyway because it was never dependent on the feeling. Jamie sat with this for the rest of the afternoon. That evening, he did not watch a motivational video. He did not search for inspiration or consume content about the thing he wanted to build. He opened the project he had been starting and stopping for 8 months and worked on it for 45 minutes without waiting to feel ready. It was not the best 45 minutes of work he had ever produced. The feeling was largely absent. The work was rough and halting in the way of work done without the support of inspiration. But it was real work. It moved the project in a way that 4 days of motivated bursts followed by 2 weeks of refueling had not moved it in 8 months. He did it again the next morning, and the morning after that, not because he had found more motivation, because he had stopped waiting for it. He had made a shift so simple it felt almost anticlimactic, from a person who worked when motivated to a person who worked on a schedule that did not consult motivation before running. 45 minutes every morning. The project opened before the phone was checked. The work happening because it was the time for the work to happen, not because the feeling had arrived to authorize it. The motivation still came. In fact, it came more reliably than it ever had in the years of chasing it, because consistent work generates its own momentum, and momentum generates its own feeling of progress, and the feeling of progress is a more sustainable source of motivation than any video or quote or surge of inspiration consumed passively. He had been looking for the feeling in the wrong place. It had been inside the work the entire time. 4 months after that lunch conversation, the project Jamie had been starting and stopping for 8 months was finished. Not because he had finally found enough motivation to complete it, because he had finally stopped needing motivation to begin. You do not need more motivation. You have had enough motivation. You have had years of it, real, genuine, energizing motivation that arrived reliably and meant everything in the moments it was present. The motivation was never the missing piece. The missing piece was what happened on the days it did not show up, What you need is a system that does not require the visitor's presence to function, an identity that expresses itself through consistent action rather than consistent feeling. The decision made once quietly without ceremony that the work is happening on a schedule and the schedule does not ask how you feel before it runs. Motivation is the spark. Identity is the engine. The spark is wonderful, but you cannot run an engine on sparks alone. Jamie spent 4 years chasing the feeling. The day he built something that did not need the feeling to run was the day the thing he had been trying to build finally started becoming real. Stop searching for motivation. Start building the system that works without it. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it today.